Good morning. This is Father Stephen Kelly from St. John's Church in Detroit. We're continuing our series of daily and morning meditations where we generally look at one or another lessons that are assigned for morning or evening prayer, what is known as the Daily Office Lectionary. And I thought today we would deviate from doing the lesson because I want to talk about a saint that we missed over the weekend, and that is St. Bernard. Now, I'm not talking about the dog, although the dog is certainly named after the saint. But St. Bernard was a great 11th and 12th century saint of the church. And let me kind of give you some highlights about his life because I find him utterly and completely fascinating. So he was born in the year 1091 and in Dijon in Burgundy. And he actually, his parents offered him to God. His mother offered him to God, as she did with all of her children. And in fact, some people have called her, his mom, the mother of saints because her 6 sons all became monks. Her husband, after her death, became a monk, and her daughter became a nun. Right? And so they all had this sort of sense of the importance of the church. But as it says in the biography from the Anglican Breviary, the most gifted of her sons was Saint Bernard. He grew up with an unbelievable winsomeness of personality and eloquence of speech. And he had an ability to attract people. After his mom's death, he determined when he was 22, to flee from the temptations of the world and to join a monastery called the Citeaux, which the Cistercian order. Now, if you know anything about the monks, the Benedictine order has been around since St. Benedict, right, forever. But the Citeaux, the Cistercians, were a very strict observance of the Benedictine rule. And so the Cistercian order started at Citeaux. And so Bernard wanted to take this very strict and austere observance of the church, and he thought it would help him to become holier. But what's interesting is that a thing unknown, namely that 4 of his brothers who were sufficient age and many other of his kith and kin, to the number of 30 people, joined the order with him at the same time. Imagine a monastery who had X number of brothers suddenly having 30 people knocking on the door and saying, we're all here to join and become holy. I mean, what an amazing opportunity that must have been for the order. And then afterwards, his father, because his mother had died, and his other brother, once he came of age, joined the house as the religious order as well. And it is said, I love this quote, that mothers hid their sons and wives hid their husbands wherever he came, lest he move them to sacrifice such as his own. For the nobles and soldiers of that day held their lives cheap in the service of chivalry and thought it not strange, as men do now, to make a similar sacrifice of themselves in dedication to God. Right? And so, anyway, he was offered many opportunities to become a bishop in Genoa and Milan and several others. And several of the popes called him to help with ecclesiastical reforms. And the Pope even ordered him to preach one of the Crusades, which he did with great success in getting volunteers there for. But the crusade ended in a disaster, as many of them did, which St. Bernard sorrowfully blamed on the sins of those crusaders who walked not after the way of the cross. So great were his mighty works, according to the Anglican Breviary, that of him it hath said he carried the 12th century on his shoulders, but not without suffering. He fell asleep in the Lord at being the age of 63 and was canonized within 21 years of his death. He's the author of hymns and prayers and many other writings, which, as said of his sermons, so delight and warm the soul that from his tongue milk and honey seem to flow into words. For what reason he's called the mellifluous doctor, and in 1830 was declared a doctor of the church. So anyway, so now you know, right? You used to seeing the dog and you say, oh, there's a St. Bernard. But the person who is St. Bernard was the 12th century leader who helped to form the nucleus of the spiritual engine of the church for the Cistercians. So today's Monday, 12:15, Holy Communion. I do hope that you'll join us. And God willing, we'll see you in church.